Breakfast Casserole, the dish to serve people when you don't have time and the perfect meal prep. But first, he must make coffee, because without coffee, what's the point? Now that he's ready, let's begin. He uses a baking sheet and lines it with aluminum foil, because he doesn't like to clean, and because bacon is incredibly greasy. So once the baking sheet is lined with foil, he fetches his bacon, and proceeds to remove it from the child-proof packaging, which proves to be a viable adversary. But never stand between a man and his bacon. After some reorganization and under Jake's watchful eye, this raw meat goes into the oven to become a gift from the higher powers that be. He sets his oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and begins prepping the sausage, or the meat in a tube. He squeezes all of it out from its plastic casing. This is the hot variety because he prefers spice. The spice of life is spice. He also then prepares another pan. This he adds about 2 to 3 handfuls of freshly washed spinach. The amount depends on the size of your hands. If you're a giant, then maybe 1. He adds some salt to the spinach. This will remove moisture and allow it to whittle a little bit faster and add flavor. A quick check on the sausage to ensure that it's browning correctly, and he returns to his cutting board. And now it's time to crack some eggs. He begins by cracking them into a small vessel and adds them to a larger one. He does this 11 more times. And then, on the 12th egg, the special white egg, he cracks it. And although this may be the egg for the ugly duckling which turns into a beautiful swan, today we're eating it. So, into the vessel it goes. And then he cleans, because ants, and possibly salmonella. Unlikely, but possible. Another sip of coffee, and it's time to check on the bacon, which apparently is not done, so he leaves it in the oven. He removes the spinach with a slotted spoon into a bowl, making sure to gather all of it. Once the sausage has reached the desired brownness, he removes it using a slotted spoon. This ensures he doesn't gather any of the additional grease which he doesn't necessarily want in his casserole. And much like the grease, he also doesn't want the added moisture from the spinach, so he squeezes it out into his pan, which will go into the sink and eventually down into the trash. Another sip of coffee for good measure, and he proceeds to add a cup of heavy cream to his eggs. And then another cup, which totals 2. And then it's time to turn the eggs into seawater. He adds a copious amounts of salt because there are 12 eggs, each one requiring a specific amount of sodium chloride, not to mention freshly ground black pepper, a sprinkle of cayenne pepper, and a generous rasping of the king spice, also known as nutmeg. And then, using the wires tied to a handle, he whisks. And though it eventually looks like eggnog, which it is not, do not attempt to drink it. 1, because there's no rum, and 2, because salmonella. Maybe. And then it's time to grate a pound of Swiss cheese. Yes, Swiss. It adds a nice creamy texture without an overbearing sharpness that cheddar would provide. Another fantastic cheese would be Gruyere, which also adds a nice creamy texture. Once it's grated, he sets aside and removes the bacon from the oven. And although it may not look that crispy, it's not what he was desiring. He wants a nice kind of chew to it. He fetches a cutting board and another piece of paper to drain it on, which he could also use a plate, and places it, allowing it to cool and drain. He sets the tray aside and also sets his bacon aside and reaches for his coffee. Another sip of the black nectar to revitalize the soul, and back to work. He grabs his casserole dish, sets it on his cutting board, and reaches for the fat made from cow's milk, also known as butter. This he covers the casserole dish and also employs the finger method to ensure that all crevices are covered. And just to verify, he uses a flashlight. Any place reflecting too much, he rubs with his finger. With spinach in hand, Edward's scissored hands makes short work. Why use scissors? Because he doesn't want to dirty his cutting board. And quite frankly, it's easier. He merely wants a rough chop, enough to why he doesn't need dental floss after eating breakfast. Then he sprinkles it across the bottom, trying to make a nice, even layer. Once he's completed the layer of spinach, he moves on to the sausage, making sure to turn it into small crumbles. He doesn't necessarily want large chunks or large curds, just small little sausage bits. Once the second layer is complete, he moves on to the eggs. A quick stir with a whisk, and he brings it back. And like an onion or lasagna, he works in layers, slowly caressing the spinach and sausage with the gentle flow of the liquefied remains of unborn chickens. like a babbling creek between mountain peaks. He covers the bottom and then reaches for the cheese, and copious amounts of it. After the cheese comes the bacon. This he crumbles into small pieces until he has reached a satisfactory amount above the cheese. Then he adds more eggs, more sausage, more bacon, more cheese, more bacon, and finally the rest of the eggs. Now it's time for the casserole to come into its own, and so it must go into the hot box known as the oven. As he places it in the oven, he makes sure that there's no spinach or anything on the sides. He does want it to be pretty, of course. 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 45 minutes. In the meantime, the remaining bacon will serve as breakfast, along with his remaining coffee. Nothing quite like coffee-flavored bacon. Or is it bacon-flavored coffee? After 45 minutes, he removes the casserole from the oven, and after a quick minute of letting it cool, he cuts into it. This casserole is enough to feed 48 foodies, 12 regular people, 4 powerlifters, 1 Ron Swanson, and absolutely 0 vegans. And although it looks quite warm and delicious, he is not yet done. He needs to add a little bit of a garnish. So, using a very sharp knife, he cuts some green onions into thinly slices, and he garnishes it. And that is how you make a breakfast casserole for you, your family, and the people who like green onions. If you like this video, share, like, and subscribe, and until next time, eat well. And in the meantime, he will continue to add green onions.